My name's Owain and I'm the Education Officer for Amphibian and Reptile Conservation, or ARC. And ARC are a national NGO who are primarily concerned with conservation of our amphibians and of our reptile species, and also the habitats on which they depend. And we do that through a whole manner of different ways. So there is education, there is lobbying, campaigning, and partnership work with other NGOs, so taking that all to governmental decisions, local decisions, and there is managing the habitats as well, so managing the habitats to ensure that they're the most suitable they can be for wildlife, and also working with landowners to do the same, and specific plans for different species as well. Heathland, or in this case dry lowland heath, is the kind that is best for reptiles, that has all our 6 reptile species, is characterised by a low-lying shrub sort of area really, so heather plants. And why it's so good for reptiles is because it has this low-lying shrub layer, so it's characterized by this shrub. It doesn't have so much shading, so there's not these huge trees all around, which means that area there's far more suitable basking areas for the reptiles. It's warmer on the ground, they've got sandy areas they can bask in which are warm as well as having that reduction in shade. And because Heathland itself is quite rich in lots of specific species beyond reptiles, gets invertebrates and all sorts, it then has a supply of food, so it has sort of everything it needs. It has its shelter, space for all the mating and things like that. It has areas it can hibernate, and it has the food it needs. So it has everything it needs in one space, which is why you get all 6 of our reptile species here. We have the grass snake, which is our longest snake, so maybe 1.2 meters would be a big sort of adult individual. And that species is known for being a bit of our wetter snake, so it prefers the wetter environment. You might find it in ponds and things like that because it feeds on fish, it feeds on amphibians, and you will find it sometimes laying its eggs in compost heaps and things like that. So that is the largest of our snakes. We also have the adder, which is our only venomous snake, characterized by this zigzag pattern down its back in terms of ID, and it's got vertical pupils as well. Really, really beautiful patterns. The males have a black zigzag, the females tend to have more of a brown zigzag, and that animal can lives across the UK, quite a northern range of a species really for a reptile, and it lives in areas, it lives in moorland, grassland, open sort of scrubby forest and heathland, things like that. I did say it's our only venomous species, but it's just absolutely really is nothing to be worried about. You are more likely to be injured by unloading your dishwasher than you are by being bitten by an adder or a snake in this country, full stop. So really, it's just a beautiful animal and a joy to see anywhere. And then our third snake, sometimes referred to as the third snake because so few people know about it, is also our rarest snake, and perhaps our most enigmatic snake is the smooth snake. And that is only found now on this dry lowland heath habitat, this habitat that exists across Surrey, Hampshire and Dorset, in these heathlands like the one behind me today. It once had a much wider range, but it's sort of been pushed into these areas exclusively now. And that is characterized, so it has, unlike the adder, it has an ID feature. It has a round-shaped pupil. It doesn't have that zigzag pattern down its back. It's about sort of 2/3, half a meter, 2/3 of a meter long. Half is more likely, and it's a sort of brownish grey colour. Really well sort of camouflaged into drier bits of heather. So those are the 3 snakes. We also have 3 native lizards. We have the common lizard, which, as its name suggests, is the one that's quite a bit more widespread and you'll find in various places. We have the slow worm, which is our legless lizard. So lots of people do mistake it for a snake. So it no longer has its external limbs, but it still has remnants of its chest, its sort of shoulder and hip skeleton inside it. Really amazing animal. Quite often that is one that it's a gardener's friend, can be found in gardens if you're lucky if you have them in your garden. Eats slugs and snails and invertebrates. Then we have our rarest lizard, which is the sand lizard, which can grow sort of 15, 16 centimeters. As its name suggests, it needs sand as part of its habitat because the females, they make little egg burrows and they need a sandy substrate to bury those eggs in. And the sand lizard is a beautiful animal. It has these eye spots running down in terms of a pattern. Really recommend you Google and see what they look like. The males have a really striking green, vertical green sides in the breeding season. So it really is a beautiful animal, and that's our rarest lizard. So 6 species of reptiles found naturally in the UK, and a couple of non-natives that have sort of semi-naturalized themselves here as well. We are delighted, always delighted with an interest in reptiles, but we do recommend that looking for reptiles is done really sympathetically. So if you were to go out and look for adders or look for lizards or anything like that, and you weren't part of a formal survey, everything is better through a long lens. So we really recommend looking at them from a binoculars, standing far enough away, or through a camera lens that you can see the animals, because you'll also get a much more natural behavior as well. And we actually, if you are a photographer who's looking to take photos of those adders for whatever reason, we actually have a library available as well, should people want to do that. But everything's better from a long lens, except if you actually are part of a formal survey. So we work with a number of volunteers, as do lots of our partners, to survey for reptiles throughout the year, and that's a really nice way to get to see them, because we use the data from those surveys to actually inform conservation. So what I'm doing here is, this is a bit degraded, but I'm turning over a piece of a sort of roofing material. And these roofing materials are put down as artificial refugia. And what they do is they're placed around strategically across the landscape, and we use them to do reptile surveys. And what those reptile surveys will be is, a few times a year, someone who is trained, and they have a training which means they're able to receive a license, because you need a license to look for smooth snakes and sand lizards. They'll be trained to go and do those surveys. These surveys will have landowner permission, depending on where they are. We'll turn them over and we'll look what's underneath. And the reason is, and I think any sort of reptile keepers will be aware of this, is because these bits of material hold on to that warmth a bit more warm up a bit quicker. So they're a good area, particularly in the morning and the evening, to turn over, because they're that much warmer and they attract the reptiles. So they're more likely for us to find a reptile under them, and that way we can do the counts and the surveys. So one of the great things about managing areas of wildlife, managing natural areas for reptiles, is that reptiles are an umbrella species. So when you protect a reptile, you cast this shade, you cast this umbrella, and you protect a whole series of things underneath them. And that's because reptiles are carnivores. So there's a whole series of animals, a whole food chain underneath them, different levels, different interactions, right down to plant level. And they're all interrelated. And so effectively, when you look after a snake, when you try and manage an area to conserve a lizard, you're actually doing work to conserve an entire ecosystem. The thing about reptile conservation that we find is there's quite a lot of misinformation and things like that. So because they're so cryptic, people don't know a lot about conserving them. They don't know a lot about their presence here. So actually an interest from a private sector in that way, if that interest is channeled into a wider interest in reptiles and in their conservation across their environment, like any, I think, responsible pet owner would have those kinds of interests, that's only going to be beneficial for us, because we really are always working towards making sure that people value these animals more and making sure people know more about them. So any interaction where that kind of thing can happen, any kind of ways that positive energy can be channeled, is going to be beneficial for the reptile conservation if we channel it correctly, definitely. Snakes in the Heather is a project led by Amphibian and Reptile Conservation to conserve the smooth snake and to conserve the internationally important heathland habitat on which it depends. And we're doing that in a number of ways. There are two main sides of the project. There's a citizen science side of the project. So we're going and training out an army of volunteers to go and survey the areas where the snakes might be, so that we can get baseline data and decide and look at what's happening to the population. And then the other side to the project is an education and awareness side. So letting people know that it's here, letting people know that the heathland is here and why the heathland is important. And one of the really important things about snakes in the Heather is that it's this huge partnership project. So lots of landowners have heath. There's NGOs, councils, things like that, who have areas of heath, and many of them actually already do reptile surveys. But what we're hoping to do throughout this project is get these people in a room together, get us all sharing our data, so we can really see on a national level what's happening, and we can really see how the different people are managing their individual heaths and what's happening to the populations there. And then from that, form some best practice guidance to further the conservation of the smooth snake into the future and ensure it survives.